What's good, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of 52 Books. Man, last week, as you know, was amazing. Voyage of Mercy was dope. If you haven't read the book, read the book. And man, it's a good book, man. Click right here on the little circle joint to watch that video, because it's really good. This week, man, we're going to read the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, an American slave. And this is my first Frederick Douglass book, just to keep it a stack with you. Because, you learn a little stuff about Frederick Douglass, he was born a slave, then he fought for his freedom and all that. But let's get into his life. So we're gonna dive into it and see what's good, man. It's written by Frederick Douglass, just in case you didn't know. This the book right here, man. And let's get into it. I know this look crazy, but let's get into it. Cue background music. Yo, this book, man. I say this about a lot of books, but I'm actually connected to. I ain't no descendant, but we both black. You feel me? So, yo, Frederick Douglass, man. It starts off with his life. His mother's name was Harriet Bailey, and his father was a white gentleman. Don't know his name. As soon as he was born, after 8 months, he was separated from his mother. And the reason that slave masters did that was to detach the affection and the relationship from the mother and child. And so she was sold, and as he grew up, she would walk 12 miles, walking 12 miles after she worked, because she was a slave, you feel me? After she worked the whole day, she will walk 12 miles to meet with him every night, to talk to him before he goes to bed. And she did this for the first 7 years of his life, because she ended up dying. And we all know how it was for slaves back then. They would sleep on the damp, cold clay ground, meaning the house that they were staying in, the slave huts, had no floors to them like we thinking, no wood floors. It was just dirt, and they didn't have any blankets. And so in the winters, it's really just huddle up to stay warm for the day. And they would work them. What I found was interesting in this text was, and this is Frederick Douglass telling, this is how it was. They would work them the whole day, right? And after the work day, let's just say they get off at 4 or 5 or whatever, they would then have to go and prepare meals. Mothers would have to go and prepare meals for their families on top of that. And so time that could be spent sleeping and resting was removed and pulled away because of the need to feed your family. And as I was reading that, I was like, man, that's crazy. You doing all this work, and then you come home sleeping on bare ground, and then you make a fire to cook for your family, man. I thought that was an amazing detail to put in there. He also talked about how slaves, whenever another master would come to meet his master, their slaves would argue about who had the better master and whatnot. Even though they both hated their masters, but it was somewhat of a pride thing to say, I have the better master type stuff. But that's the mindset that they were in. It's like, man, this person is oppressing you, yet to your own brother, you're saying, oh, I got the better one. And that was just amazing and cool to see. He also said this. He said, it's a common misconception for the people in the North to think that slaves sing out of contentment and happiness. Nothing could be further from the truth. He says that slaves, they would only sing to express the sorrow and the grief in their hearts. And so the louder they would sing, the more they would sing, was to show how much they were hurting, how much they were burdened, and how much Their hearts were aching for the predicament that they were in. And that was just, man, like heavy, heavy, heavy. He ended up getting sold to another couple, and it was the mistress who taught him to read. So she started teaching him to read, and he got the hang of it a little bit. And what happened was the master found her teaching him to read, and he said these words, and I'm going to look at the exact quote because it blew my mind, and it is so important to know this today. He said this. I'm going to read the notes that I took, and y'all do with it what y'all will, but I think you should put this on your wall. You should put it somewhere in your house, frame it up. This is what he said. He said, learning would spoil the best nigger in the world. If you teach that nigger to read, there would be no keeping him. It would never unfit him to be a slave. I'm going to read that again. Learning would spoil the best nigger in the world. If you teach that nigger to read, there would be no keeping him. It would never unfit him to be a slave. And so the master was saying, if you teach him to read, he ain't going to have the slave mindset anymore. There's nothing you're going to be able to do to stop him, because his mindset will change from slave to being independent. And when I read those words, I was like, goodness. And Frederick Douglass said that's all he needed to hear. And after she stopped teaching him to read, he started learning to read from the little white boys, the poor white boys that lived in the area. And so because they were poor, he would take bread from the house when he was sent on errands, and he would give the bread to the little white boys in exchange for them telling him new words, teaching him how to read and all that. And man, that was so good. So that quote is something that, man, I'm going to get framed up and put it on my wall, because man, when you teach a man knowledge, they literally do not remain slaves. That should be a life lesson for you. So all in all, this book is going great. It's a really good read. Tune in Friday to see how this thing ends. I'm sure it's going to be good. Thank you for tuning in to 52 Books. As always, like, subscribe, and if you got a book you want me to review, put it in the comments below. Peace.